much for joining us here today at Petco Park, and we'd like to welcome our viewers that are joining us as well at Padres.com and listeners on 97.3 The Fan. The 2022 season was certainly a special one. From walk-off heroics, MVP performances in the regular season to victories over 100-plus win teams, the Mets and the Dodgers, and a postseason that sent them to their third National League Championship Series in franchise history. The Padres certainly galvanized the entire city of San Diego, as we saw firsthand, and the memories will certainly last a lifetime. With us today to discuss the 2022 season is the manager of the Padres, Bob Melvin, and the president of baseball operations and general manager, A.J. Preller. We'll begin with opening remarks from A.J., and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions. So without any further ado, A.J. Preller.
Yeah, I think all of us were hoping that we'd be playing Game 7 here tonight. But obviously, like Don mentioned, it was overall a very good season for our organization, a ton of positives. Qualifying for the playoffs, we set a goal early in the season, get to October. You've got to get into the postseason tournament, and then to give yourself an opportunity to do some damage and to qualify for the postseason, to have the victories we had over the Mets and the Dodgers and play in the LCS. Our players, an exciting group, talented group, and they did a great job all season long, and especially when it counted really at the end of the season in the big moments in the big game. In the big games, Bob and his staff did a great job creating an atmosphere down in that clubhouse. There were injuries. Obviously, the situation we're in with, from the Tatis suspension to new faces at the trade deadline, some different challenges there, and the group did a really good job making sure that our team stayed focused and was in a position to do some really big things there in October. As exciting as anything from a fan standpoint, to see the excitement created in the community year-round, start to finish, the support for this team, the love for the team, it made a real difference, for our club and, within the organization, the excitement in October. I think to me, it had a real impact on our players, and you could feel it in the community. And I think probably the biggest thing overall for all of us with the Padres is, this was a taste of what's to come. I think we all understand that we didn't quite get to the final goal, and I think the biggest thing is looking forward, understanding there's another couple steps in front of us. But I think the experiences we all had here over the last 6 to 8 months is going to serve us well here going forward to eventually get to that big stage and do what we want to do as an organization.
This time we will open it up for questions. If you put your hand up, we'll have either Tiffany or Vanessa bring over a microphone to you, and we'll start with A.J. Casilla.
A.J., can you kind of go back to the trade deadline and reassess all those moves you made and kind of the way they came to fruition toward the end of the season? And also, you still have Josh, you still have Juan going forward, where that sets you up going forward?
Yeah, I think when we got to the deadline, I think we thought we had a team that was capable of getting to the postseason, but a team winning the World Series, a team that could get to the series. I think we knew that a player like Juan Soto, you need as many of those kind of guys, but like core pieces that can hit in the middle of the lineup. I think we did it for a reason, and I think we had a chance to see the impact that he had there into October. And I think probably the biggest thing with at least with Josh and with Hader and with Juan Soto, there's carry forward. So I think ultimately it wasn't just a rental piece. They're guys that in Juan's case should be here for many years to come, and definitely the next 3 years with Josh this year and next year for sure. So again, I think we feel like we have a really good foundation in place. We don't have, from an off-season standpoint, we've got some needs and some things that we have to go do. But a 3-hole bat and a guy to impact the game in the back of the pen, we have those boxes checked, and it allows us to focus on some other things.
Many years to come, is that a priority for you this off-season to hopefully make that a reality?
Yeah, I think we'll have that conversation. I think, again, all this is pretty fresh. I think we'll sit down here on really a lot of different fronts. But I think, from Juan's standpoint, I'm sure he's getting to know the city and getting to know the organization. I think, from when we made the deal, we made it knowing that we had him for 3 pennant races, but also understanding that, we'll sit down with Peter, with Eric, and just kind of talk about what's best for the organization long term. But he's an incredibly talented player. He's an impact player, and we'll have those conversations here. I'm sure even in this off season, just kind of taking the temperature and seeing where his head is at and going from there with it.
Kevin Acee.
AJ, you talk about there's more steps to take. What do you need to do to take those steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think every year is a little bit different. I think from that standpoint, I think we've got some free agent questions. So we've got some holes that be created through free agency. I think we'll look at the rotation clearly. I think we have with Joe, Blake Snell, and Darvish, that's a good place to start. And I think we'll look to round down the rotation out every year in the pen. You're constantly got to kind of reconfigure your pen and make sure Bob and Ruben, the group, has many as weapons as possible. But the guys that threw for us in the back of the bullpen, it was a clear strength for us at the end of the season. We'll look to build on that strength. Position player-wise, the group will be, anxious and looking forward to Fernando coming back and playing, and getting Fernando and Manny and, Juan in the middle of the lineup, or, getting them up towards the top of the lineup for us. And, we'll have some free agency questions, with Josh Bell and Brandon Drury going to free agency. We'll probably look at a bat or two that kind of complements the rest of the lineup. So, again, I think like the core pieces from a rotation standpoint, the offensive lineup and then the bullpen are in place. We'll look at, what are those couple other pieces that, give Bob and the staff like the ammunition they need to kind of take that final step or two.
In the end of the season, postseason, hamstrung a little bit with the lack of depth and options on the bench. How do you think that played in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think depth-wise, you always want to build a team that has, as much depth as possible and has every possible answer. It's just, the times there's not a perfect roster. I think ultimately you make different decisions. I think, we liked our roster that we went into the postseason with. We felt like it was a roster that, that we could win with. But that's something we always have those conversations. Talking with Bob, talking with our scouts. You want to have a complete club. We'll look at it again here as we get into the offseason into next year and make sure that as many spots, as many pinch hit options, as many pieces that could fill in for injury, that we have as many possible options that are there. And I think that's always the goal, honestly.
Bryce Miller.
AJ, it's one thing to organizationally talk about going to the World Series, contending for a World Series, but to get as far as you did this season and get within 3 games of a World Series, how did expectations change with this run in the playoffs? What is different now because of it?
I don't think the expectation is any different. I think from really over the last 6 or 7 years, and I think from the time Peter brought the club and came on board, it's about winning the World Series here in San Diego and bringing a championship to the town. So I don't think that changed really in any way. I just think for everybody just to kind of go through those experiences, playing in New York in that environment, playing in LA, winning playoff series, just the intensity of those games, and definitely playing here in Petco in front of a just awesome, wild, electric fan base that's so excited. I think that just gives our players, one, the confidence that we can do that, and you build on those experiences, and also I think the motivation to get there and do it again and finish the deal. So the expectation part of it and what the goal is, that hasn't changed, but I think the experiences we had over the last really over the entire season, and just kind of getting through an entire the length of a 162 season and being in a position to do it in October. But what we saw in the last month, I'll let Bob talk on it. We've had a couple of conversations about it. I think it's going to serve us well here going forward as we hopefully play in the postseason next year.
Yeah, I was going to ask Bob, what are your thoughts on expectations given what you guys did in the last few weeks?
Well, I think the expectations are, you mean for next year? Yeah. I would say they're much higher. So, I mean, that was kind of the expectation this year. Thought kind of long and hard about, was this season a success? I think if you look at it from spring training, you would say, yeah, based on who we had, where we were in spring training. If you said we would go to the National League Championship Series, is that a successful season? Sure. But once it becomes part of you, and once, the moves we made at the trade deadline, and now you move forward and you're in the postseason, you're having success and you're beating quality teams, your expectations raise. So when you lose that final game, which really was unexpected because all our guys expected to go farther, and so that a little bit more of a disappointment when you look at the totality, what you think of the season. So that's kind of how I look at it. But going forward, I believe the expectations, and based on playing in these scenarios and the environments we played in should raise our expectations going into next year.
Dennis Lund?
Hey, Bob. Obviously, there's been a lot said and dissected about the eighth inning on Sunday. You're privy to a lot more than we are now that you've had a couple days to look back on it. How do you kind of take stock of how that unfolded and maybe what you would have done differently or not done differently there?
I wouldn't. When we went into that, we were going to try to cut up the 7th, 8th, and 9th with 2 guys. And going into the 8th, we had all the confidence in the world in Suarez. We had Hader up for 4 outs. We're trying to get 2 out of Robert. And I thought that was our best option. So if we use Hader there, I'm not sure we get through the 9th with him. And I'm not sure that that was a better option than the ones we had with our 2 best pitchers that we had. It just doesn't work out. So, we know that one didn't work. The other ones, we don't know whether they would have worked or not. But, it's just something that you have to understand that you felt like it was the best option. It didn't work. You move forward.
That 1-2 take Harper had on Suarez, what did you make of that?
I wasn't happy with it. I thought that was probably the pitch he gets him out with. But look, you also have to give credit to Bryce Harper. I mean, I'm not sure many guys are going to get him out in that spot. I mean, he was just on fire and on a mission and, performing at probably the highest level that you could perform at in the postseason. So, it didn't work out for us, but you also have to give him credit too because he performed at about the highest level you could.
And AJ, real quick, Juan said he was going to get some x-rays on his foot from that foul ball on Sunday. What's the status with that?
Yeah, everything came back negative, so yeah, it's a bone bruise, and he'll have the off season and be ready to go.
Jeff Sanders?
Anything else procedural, surgery, anything that's going to be cleaned up this offseason on anybody?
Not really. I think we ended overall pretty healthy as a group. So yeah, I think nothing new, to report. Just like I mentioned on the Soto front, he got those X-rays in general. The group good to go.
And status of Tatis, where is he? Is he back home, and do you expect him back in San Diego shortly to start preparing for the year?
Yeah, so he'll spend the off season. I mean, I think obviously it's all about the rehab portion of it. He's had the shoulder surgery, and then he had the the wrist repair. So, I think, overall he should be good to go when start baseball activity for the start of spring training. By playing into the postseason, knock some games off of, off the suspension. So, we'll look at April, but I think right now it's all about just making sure he rehabs from those from the 2 surgeries. He'll spend a lot of time in San Diego here in the off season. And then, when we get towards the beginning part of next year, he can start doing more baseball activity, so he's ready to go for the start of spring training.
I think at the start of the year, people would have looked at your farm system and said you wouldn't have, the pieces to make the trades that you did at the deadline. They might be saying the same thing about next year. You've depleted the farm system. Can you just talk about the health and what Chris has done for you guys leading into next year?
Yeah, it's a huge part of our organization is you gotta draft well, you gotta sign well, players that we want to be able to come through the system and play for Bob and play for the group at the big league level. And again, I said it the last few years we've had a really strong system, and sometimes that's reflective in the rankings. A lot of times it's reflective in other clubs' interest in your players and our own evaluations. And I think we knew going into the deadline we were going to be in a position of strength to have options if we wanted to do it. Our scouts do a great job every single year. We understand it's like a really, it's as important as a day on the baseball calendar as the draft day and the international signing day. We're really excited about the group we just had in instructional league and the group playing in the fall league. We've got some guys opening some eyes, in those areas, and I think a lot of attention on making sure those guys are doing what they need to do to come here and play at Petco down the road. So we're excited about it still.
Bernie Wilson?
AJ, what position do you want to see Tatis at next year, and have you had discussions with him yet?
Yeah, the position would be like on the field for 160, 145 games, so that position would work for
Infield,
us.
outfield, shortstop,
Yeah.
center field, left
I
field,
think-
right field?
I think again, I know it's a question. Obviously, it's talked about a lot, and I think I really do. I think for right now, it's about just getting him healthy, and I think those are the conversations that we'll start having here in the next couple of weeks with our our scouts, our front office group, the baseball operations department, Bob and the staff, and try to get some clarity here going into spring training going forward. He gives you that options because he's a great athlete, he's a great player, he can play all over the field. And we have some other guys that have stepped up on the current roster that'll be part of the equation too. So it should be good competition, and we'll do what we think is best for him and for our club, honestly, going forward.
Annie Halbern?
Bob, I'm wondering what your process is at this point. How long do you spend looking backwards or thinking about anything versus turning the page and starting to look forwards for next year?
You spend a while reflecting. So, whether it's in totality, what the season looked like, certainly what the postseason did, it's the first few days are really hard because, like I said, you don't expect to be in this position. You expect it to go farther. And I think that's a good thing because there was an expectation level to go farther. It almost feels like, not to minimize, like a funeral because it's that compelling and it hurts, to those type of levels. So, there'll be a lot of reflection, and I think you start to, really understand your thoughts and what it was all about as you go along. But, at the end of the day, it was a lot of fun. Our guys had a great time. It's a great group of guys that have taken it to another level in what their expectation is. And the group that we have coming back is going to be really hungry to go farther. So that part I know, I think over the coming days, and you start to gain a little bit more perspective on what it was all about.
And we talk a lot sometimes about players who come to a new team and how there's growing pains. I'm just wondering what this year was like for you. You spent so long with the A's to come here, maybe some of the challenges, and then also the sense of pride in being able to get this far in the postseason in your first year with a new team.
Yeah, it was a lot. Just coming into a new organization is a lot. And then, bringing in staff members and then, getting through spring training. There was a lockout before that. Didn't get to talk to the players a whole lot. Then there was some, obviously the Fernando situation, and then the season starts, and then I had to have surgery, and there was a lot to this season, but I think it makes you stronger, it makes you more resolve going forward, and I think it made us better as the season goes along. And, I tell you, we talked about the fact that, that it was hard. The season was hard, but I think it served us well when we got to the postseason because we had some hard games and some hard teams in front of us, and for the most part did pretty well.
AJ Caswell?
Bob, how do you view the assimilation of Fernando? I know it's a long way away, but assimilating him kind of back into this group and also what he might bring to this group given kind of the player he is.
Yeah, he's a really good player. So we look forward to that. I've had conversations with him. I've had dialogue with him here throughout the postseason. And he's just looking forward to helping his team and getting back. I think he has a different perspective on things now too. And the hunger that he's going to have to come in and be part of this and help his team go farther than we were last year is pretty immense. So it's what he's focused on right now is just getting healthy, getting back and being part of this group because he missed it.
Kevin Acey?
AJ, you've been able to convince Peter to up the payroll consistently. Do you anticipate this is the level you'll operate at going forward?
Yeah, I think each year and each situation is different. I think the biggest thing is that, I think from like all of our situation, and I think with Peter, he's given us the resources, and I think it's pretty clear that, he wants to win a championship. And that to win a championship doesn't mean like, hey, you have to have a payroll at X level or anything like that. I think, it means you have to have a complete team that's, that has, a lot of different answers for the things that are going to come up through the season. Sometimes that calls for players in free agency trades. Players of different caliber and different dollar amounts will sit down here. The process started yesterday. So it's I think playing this deep is awesome and fun. It also we've got some work cut out for us in front of us here in the GM meetings in the next in 10 days or so, and we'll start that process and look and present, all the different options that we think are there and what that means from a dollar standpoint, and have that conversation and do what we think is best for the group for next year and for going forward.
Bob, what do you think the next step or what needs to happen for your team to take the next step or two steps?
I don't think a lot. I think the guys that we have here now are prepared to take that next step. They were prepared to take it this year. So there's going to be a lot of resolve and fight in trying to get to that next level and expecting to. So, you know, you look at the core guys we have coming back, this is going to be as good a group as any. So AJ's always been good about filling in and you know, filling out the roster. But I think you look at our group that we have coming back right now, we're going to be as good as anybody.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you all for being
Can I
here
say
today.
one thing?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you know, I just want to thank the city of San Diego and our fans. I mean, they were immense in our success. And we walked out here, you know, in the last month, really the whole year, but the last month, getting to the postseason was hard. They were a huge part of it. And we'd look out in Gallagher Square and you'd walk into that ballpark, especially in the postseason, and see people in their seats before the game started, rooting us on. Man, we felt it. So, you know, there's 26 players on the roster, 28, whatever it is. They were almost like a roster piece for us, and they drove us and inspired us. So I want to make sure that there's some clarity with that.
Well said. Thank you all for being here today. See you in 2023.